and welcome back to the Golf Intervention Podcast. We are so excited you're tuning in tonight. My name is Eric Layton. I'm the Director of Golf Instruction at the Country Club of Virginia in Richmond, and I'm here with my co-host, Rob Fales. He is what is your title again? Tell it to the listener.
The Player Development Leader at Birdwood Golf at Boar's Head Resort.
At UVA.
At UVA.
There's a lot. I mean, I will never get that right. But Robbie teaches golf, a lot of golf.
I teach golf.
He teaches some golf classes to the UVA undergrads.
Yeah, we teach an undergrad class. Yeah, it's fun.
I just spent 2 days in Charlottesville, as you know, Robbie. We talked about it a little bit. My son is an incoming first year at the University of Virginia.
Yeah, welcome.
UVA, and I've lived in Virginia for 20 years. I lived in Charlottesville for a while, right? So I had a sense of how great of a university it is. It is a phenomenal place. It's very hard to get into. My son's all great, he's a great student. Like a lot of kids are great students, but just really, really hard to get into there. And they had a stat, 90% of their incoming freshmen, they call it first year class, graduated in the top 10% of their high school class. That's a pretty phenomenal stat. So it's just a really cool place, and they have incredible faculty, and they were leading orientations. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, because some of the orientation speeches that I heard were very much in line with some of the things we talked about on the Golf Intervention podcast. So today on this episode, we wanted to do a little bit of a follow-up on the Sasho MacKenzie interview.
Yeah.
We could not be more grateful for the 90 minutes that he spent with us answering our questions.
Yeah, it was
so
incredible.
So generous. And we learned a lot, and there was a lot in there, right? So what we want to do in our normal golf intervention style is follow back on it, contextualize it for the listener, depending on who you are and your level of player. What would be really interesting for you? We sort of built from like putting to this whole like 3D flat spot stuff, which is maybe above. I haven't really thought much about. I have to be honest, never really thought much about that in my life. So that's a very conceptual concept, right? That isn't relevant to everyone that was listening. So what we want to do is like try to connect the relevancy.
Yes.
That's what we want to do. And then I thought if we had some time, I would like to kind of go through our last 20 episodes, not one by one, but some thoughts, general thoughts, general themes that we're seeing from those, like a kind of a highlight show.
Yeah, recurring themes, yeah.
Things we're seeing in our instruction, things we're hearing from people and from our students that are really, really helping them, and things that I saw, like even just at orientation, listening to.
Yeah, when you get a text of a presentation slide that says education is an intervention.
Education is an intervention. That was the first slide of this really world-renowned psychologist who's a part of the faculty there at UVA, best-selling author, and that was her first slide. And she went on to give, I thought, one of the most impactful 45-minute talks for parents of college students that I've heard. And I've heard a few because I've got 2 college students now, so I've been through some of those, which is phenomenal. So anyway, back to Sasho. We just released it this morning, so I've got no feedback from listeners yet, 0, which I will by tomorrow, right? Because it's downloading at a pretty quick rate. People love to hear from Sasho, so I thought the thing that jumped out to me very first, like if we were to kind of go through the bullet points, was how much his putting. His only 3 things that matter in putting. I don't know how we framed that, but he basically boiled putting down to the 3 things he thinks that matter, and everything else is, could matter, may not. As he said, fuzz. Is that what his term was? Fuzz.
Yes.
Right? So, and those 3 things, in the order that he said them in, were essentially the exact same 3 things that Mark Sweeney, the inventor of Aimpoint, told us on our podcast, which is a little off convention, right? Which were the same 3 things that you and I did a putting episode before the Mark Sweeney episode, talking about I forget what we called it. A new form of. I can't remember. But anyway, you'll see it. The episode. And basically, it says it starts with green reading. It starts with green reading. This is a green reading skill, essentially, that then we develop how to control the face and control the speed.
Yeah.
And it was just like our episode, Mark Sweeney, and then Sasha, you and I learned from smart people like that. So,
yes.
But I think that does defy the common belief. Because if you see a lot of really good... Look, we host 2 college teams at practice from time to time in our country club. And when I watch them practice, they don't practice like
that. It's all start line gates and stroke path and impact spot.
They're working on things outside, not necessarily. They're working on things outside of those 3 things. And Sasha would say, spend your time on these 3 things and you're going to get, these are the 3 things that matter. I see a lot of, to your point, they put the string down, they even snap a string line or whatever, and they stand in the same spot and putt and putt and putt and putt and putt and putt. And Mark Sweeney and Sasha both made the same point, like, they're going to miss that putt from 8 feet or 10 feet on the tour half or more of the time. And then if you give them the read once, they're going to make the X 80% of them from there. And there's not a ton to be gained there, right? There's not a ton to be gained there because you're not varying your spot that you're practicing from enough, right? This goes back to kind of randomizing your practice and start with green reading and make that skill better. Yeah. So what did you take away from that part outside of what I was just kind of mentioning there?
Yeah, so if you look at the Mark Sweeney episode and then you add in from Sasho the speed reading, now I think you have an amazing combination of ways to improve your prediction of what the ball actually does from your putter head to the hole. So I think speed reading is something that almost nobody does. A lot of people don't even think about it. If I ask golfers, hey, how long do you think this ball is going to take to get to the hole? They'll look at me like I got 3 heads. So I think things like, time stamping is great. You can start to understand across different types of friction.
When you say time stamping, describe that a little bit.
So you can do this with a metronome. It's pretty easy. You go to like 70 beats a minute. And what you're going to do is you're going to predict how many beats you're going to hear between impact and when the ball gets to the hole. Right? You could even count this out yourself. You can just say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. And every time you hear a beat or you hear that time marker, that stamp, right, you're going to predict where the golf ball is going to be along that path. So I think a lot of times what I tend to see is golfers won't change the spacing between the balls enough. They'll put them too much in a constant distance between each other, or they'll put not enough stamps, or they'll put way too many, where in reality, you're going to have most of the distance between the first 2 balls, and then that distance between the balls is going to be, steadily decreasing gradually. And then as it gets up by the hole, obviously they're going to be pretty close together. So I think if golfers predict that, okay, the ball is going to be there in 3 seconds, and actually it's 5, well then how does that affect the prediction of break and how much they see the ball coming down the slope? If the ball only has 3 seconds to get down the slope, but it actually has 5 seconds to get down the slope, right, how much more break is that golfer going to be able to perceive? So they go part and parcel. You can't separate one and the other, right? So I think aim point gives you the amount of break. I think for that amount of break, a golfer needs to correctly perceive the speed of the putt relative to that amount of break in order to deliver the putter speed that they want at impact. So I think they both complement each other really well. What I recommend golfers do is predict the speed. Try your best to produce that speed. And then before assessing the putt, and this would be where maybe you could do it eyes closed, ask yourself, hey, did I produce the speed that I wanted? If the answer is yes, then look up and try to learn something from the putt. If it was speed that you wanted, great. If it wasn't, then you know that it was probably a speed prediction issue because you created the speed that you wanted, it just wasn't the right speed. So it's likely a speed prediction issue. Whereas if you didn't produce the speed that you wanted, right, understand that you only have a couple options to change putter head speed at impact. We're not going to try to change acceleration. We're not going to try to change impact spot. We're not going to try to get the ball rolling differently, right? Those are all, they might help. They might move the needle, fractionally, but they're not going to move the needle nearly as much as improving your awareness of the actual club head speed at impact. So that was kind of some of the main things that I took from that portion of the interview.
Our episode was called A New Method for Better Putting.
Yeah.
Right. So the devil's in the details there. Like you could listen to that episode and be like, is that really a new method for better putting? Yes, I think it is not what people have talked about in the past, because it is an obsession with reading green, reading the greens, and creating a speed control, like you just, one method you just talked about for practicing your speed control, like huge, overwhelmingly the most important things, doing those first and matching them up, and then obviously being able to control the putter face to get the ball to roll where you want it to go. And that kind of flows nicely into the next segment when you're talking about, being aware of the putt speed and the slope and all that, which was this very interesting, and it's interesting. You and I just had a conversation about this, which is heads up putting, which you mentioned you currently do, and you asked me if I do, and I said no, I don't. I've messed around with it a little bit, but I don't. Honestly, I don't search for solutions in my putting. Yeah, I'm happy there. I'm content. Yeah. So,
right on.
If it was 20% better, I would. But I think it would take me some time to get there, and I don't practice that much. So, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Maybe if I had more time, but kind of give us some insight as to who you think Rob fails, because this is something that you do.
Yes.
Do yourself, and I'm sure you work. Do you teach that to students? Like, give me an insight into how much heads-up putting you teach and who you see having success with it, and maybe some other thoughts about it.
So I'll say 95% of golfers, with the caveat of, for the 5% of golfers who are just picking up the sport for the first time, who have serious contact issues in putting. And when I say serious, I'm not talking about what Dr. MacKenzie said with a couple centimeters right or left of face. I'm talking about hitting the top of the golf ball, hitting the ground, hitting it off the edge of the toe. I'm talking about golfers who are literally not picked up a club before. Those golfers, I would probably not recommend putting heads up right away, just because for them, even in putting, the skill of literally just hitting the face is not as assured, maybe. But again, that's 5%. That's of all golfers, that's actually a fairly low percentage, because I would say even once you get down into the high 90s, now you're starting to make contact with your putter at a clip to where now heads up can start to have some benefits. So
you and I were just talking about that right before we came on, and it was interesting. I kind of made the point that, well, it seems like a lot of complete beginners would have to start with their head down, looking at the ball traditionally, just to make good contact. But you know what? And then you'd have to learn from there. Like, I'd have to transition to heads up, which Sasho claims his research, I'm sure it doesn't claim it, his research shows there's an improved skill there. But I was thinking, like, when you learn to dribble a basketball, when you first dribble a basketball, you do it with looking at the ball, right, and looking at your hand and dribbling it, right? Like, a lot of sports, you're looking at it to get the feel of it first.
Yeah.
And then over time, your skill improves, and you watch the NBA,
comp.
And you go, hey, on the NBA, they don't look down. Or if I'm looking down, someone's going to steal the ball from me because I'm not paying attention to them. I'm not good at passing because I don't know where anybody is. And so I learned to adapt that skill to the game.
I think it's a good comp.
And so it's interesting to me that the research shows it can improve. You feel like it's improved your putting.
Yes.
We haven't seen it. We saw Jordan Spieth do this. Would probably be before Sasha's research, I think. I don't know the timing of it.
Not sure.
That Jordan Spieth did it at a certain distance inside of, I don't know. I think it was a feel for thing for him. Call it 10 or 12 feet and inside, but not anymore. He doesn't do it anymore, I don't believe. So I think it would take some time. That would be a slow moving, kind of glacially slow change.
Yeah,
I would think, because for me, when I've tried it a little bit, it creates a little apprehension inside of me, and I'd have to get over that. I'm used to looking at the ball, so when I don't, it's a little bit of a lost comfort zone for me.
Yeah. I almost always introduce it in the context of a drill. It's like, hey, we're going to do I'll call it like a speed control drill, right? It's like, okay, I want you to put your eyes up where you want the ball to stop, or maybe at the aim point, what kind of Sasha was talking about, where the aim point would cross the hole, close to the hole, and introduce it in terms of a speed control drill first. And then I've had enough people, when they do the drill, their speed control gets dramatically better. They'll ask the question, hey, can I do this when I go play? And I'll promptly say, that's how I putt. And so that it can happen that way as well. And
you trick Jedi mind trick.
Correct. And then I've even heard of situations where, like, if golfers have the yips, I've seen or I've heard of situations where the heads up can help with that as a temporary placeholder, like a quick, like quote unquote quick fix for the yips is to go heads up. Yeah, it's not a long-term solution, but it can be a nice placeholder for a golfer who needs to learn some better psychology and just kind of get through a round of golf.
Well, I think for the listener who struggles with their putting, especially speed control, why not try it?
Yeah,
just why not try it?
Yeah.
And again, so let's say I'm a lifelong bad putter, self-aware, which we see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people can be lifelong bad but self-aware. Stroke isn't smooth. To your point, maybe it's not the yips, but it's something along that line. Why not try it? Because I think, again, this is kind of like that. Let me do something else. Let me create this new pathway of learning that might not have all the scar tissue of the old pathway of learning. You know, changing your grip around to the claw grip or the left hand low, or is that different enough to do that psychologically? I don't know, but I would think looking at the whole, that would feel a lot different, in my opinion.
Short term, until your brain finally figures out, like, hey, this is just masking the same thing that I've been doing. So that's why I say, like, it is, in most cases, it ends up being like a quick fix, but it can be useful in situations to where, like, again, you got a tournament in a week and you just need to say, hey, I need something to get me through this. Like, it can be definitely pretty helpful.
So busting belief systems, right? Like there's data out there that shows you could improve. Because you don't see it on TV doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And by the way, Jordan Spieth did it for a while. So, and I don't think he moved away from it because he was putting poorly. He just moved away from it.
Right. And in the quick fix comment I was making was in regards to the yips. I think from a distance control standpoint, I do think that heads up is a long-term solution, and it is for me. So
yeah, thanks for the clarification. And so the player that wants to test that out should just explore it, right? Like, again, that kind of came back to a couple of times he said that. The research shows it, but it might not work for everybody. Yep. Correct, because nothing in golf works for everybody. And that's one of the big things that we wanted to talk about.
No guarantees, yeah.
There's no guarantees, and there's no right. There's no swing. There's no, how do I do that? I mean, I used to get, this was a long time ago, but I would tell you that anybody who's taught golf over 20 plus years will tell you that anytime they spent like time on the range, walking the range, and people would come up and say, hey, can I just ask you one quick question? Okay. That one quick question, 80% of the time was, how do I start down from the top of the backswing? And that's just what it was. So, and then there was one right way to do that. Now, Sasha got into that, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I kind of feel like we've actually grown in our understanding of a lot of stuff. And I think even the common golfer has grown in their understanding of a lot of stuff. There's a lot of information out there. But the fact is these conventions still exist. Like, if you didn't know any better and I said, go learn golf, hey, I took Robbie's class at UVA and I liked it. Now I'm going to learn golf. I'm not going to take lessons. I'm just going to I'm just going to learn on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. That's going to be my golf info, which there's a lot of good info there. But it's likely that they're going to come out of that thing with a bowed left wrist and a big muscle swing and all these trends, right? Super shallow, whatever. And those are conventions, man. Like, total conventions. Yeah. You do not have to do any of that stuff. No. Tiger Woods doesn't do that stuff. Like, so the belief that there is a right way to do it is crazy. You can look at the hole and putt. Annika Sorenstam is looking down the fairway when she hits drives. She's not looking at the ball when she hits a drive. It started with a drill. That's what reminded me when you were saying you have your students start with a drill, right? Yeah. That's how Annika, listen to Annika talk about it. She'll say, yeah, just my coach had me turn my head and hit balls to help me, rotate better, whatever the key was for her. And she hit it so good she never stopped doing it, right? So no, you don't have to watch the ball. You don't have to keep your head down. Like, you could, but you don't have to. Okay. No. So there's just a lot of that stuff that's still out there. That's why we wanted to have Sasho on to kind of take us through some of that. And I thought he did a great job. I mean, there was a million more questions we could have asked him, but you only have a limited amount of time.
Yep.
And we were so appreciative of the time that he gave. So that was really cool. I thought the heads up thing is cool. I think people are going to hear that for the first time. That's not one that's made its like way
mainstream
around much.
Yeah.
I have to say, I asked him a question sort of directly about working with a tour player, and those guys are a little bit, guys and gals could be a little bit funny, tour players about, and they like to keep things close to the vest, but it seems to me like that played out in the public eye. I don't think I put him on the spot there. Like, a lot of that stuff was social media gold mine for those guys. Like, people engage with it a lot. And I thought the time he took to describe how exactly he worked through with the work of Matthew's team, right? The sort of gravity of trying to help him without screwing him up. Yeah. All of that was so cool. I mean, what did you take away from that? What was your major takeaway from the Matthew Fitzpatrick discussion?
Yeah, so this would be relevant for everyone, but especially relevant for level 3 golfers, is that there is a lot more risk to making interventions. And if your coach, if your consultant isn't asking a ton of questions, that's probably a red flag. Like, your coach needs to be asking you all of the history, memories, injury stuff. Like, hey, when you hit your best, what were you feeling? When you're hitting it your worst, what are you feeling? Hey, have you tried this? What happened when you tried that? Right? Like, all the things, because I mean, what he didn't say is, like, he's got this huge laundry list of options. You can only do 4 things, but within those 4 things, there are so many ways to move those 4 variables that really he's kind of doing process of elimination. Like, if he's asking this player a question saying, okay, well, what would your comfort level be with doing this? And they just have a gut instinct, well, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. He's going to cross it off the list. It's done, right? And so it's just a process of elimination where he's just crossing off things that aren't options until we get to a couple things that might be, right? And then even then, it's not him telling Fitzpatrick, hey, just do this. It's, all right, let's test this out for a little bit and see what you think. And then, I mean, there's just so many brilliant things about that, because really you're giving them the power, that you're giving them the choice to choose, do I want to do this or not? I think a lot of people with coaches, and coaches are to blame for this as well, because they put it in not in the right context a lot of times, but they fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I just have to do this because my coach told me to. Whereas, it would be my preference that the coach is giving options and saying, hey, let's explore this option, and you give me your feedback and see what you think. And
we've talked about that from day one.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yep.
So that would be my main takeaway is, especially with better players, you've got to get in there and dig deep, and ask enough questions to where you reduce the chances that you're going to get them going down the wrong road.
It's pretty phenomenal. I didn't realize, can't say I watched tons of golf, let alone like European tour or whatever, before he came over. And so what I hadn't realized was how good of a driver of the golf ball he was before, from a strokes gain standpoint, right? So meaning he put himself in good positions off the tee. Yeah. He did. He didn't feel like he hit it far enough to win majors. And he probably felt like as a young guy who's in his early to mid-20s, right? Like, I should be able to have some growth. Like, it's time for me to grow. And 113, 112, 113 club speed, that's not fast for the PGA Tour. I mean, I think it's 116 is average now, potentially. I mean, it's gone up a little bit. But to go all the way to 120, like 122 from one, let's say because Sasha made the point, if I start hitting it more crooked, my strokes gain isn't going to go up because now I'm going to have more disruptors, right? More penalties and more disruptors. Like I can't hit it longer and more in the woods. So I got to be extremely accurate still, but gain speed.
Yeah.
And to go to 122 club head speed, which I think was the number Sasha said and I saw, I think on the stack.
That's impressive.
That's crazy. Like 122 is fast, man.
Yeah.
Like and he's not a big guy, and he is moving it. He didn't talk about how they use the stack system really at all. He said, of course, he worked with the stack, but that was kind of it. So it's really cool. He described more about, I think, the biomechanics of the swing change.
How he created more force along the hand path.
Yeah. And that was so cool to go through that and listen to it. I mean, I don't think, like, for you and I to listen to that and people who teach golf who really are interested in helping people at that level, that was just, I mean, I was just,
awesome.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. And I think that helps the listener too. So contextualizing that as players, I mean, what I look at a lot of times is kind of a hierarchy of what we're trying to accomplish with your game. If you're learning the game, we're just learning how to hit the ball, essentially. Like, we want to make better contact. As we improve into level 2, we're controlling the contact better, right? We're starting to get the face and path awareness and relationship and skill built to where we can control the ball better and predict it better. Less mishits, less disruptors, less big misses. And then as you go into being a better and better and better player, speed and optimizing things like, like what he was talking about, speed does become a big thing. Now, either you do it naturally or you don't. You have to work on it like Matthew Fitzpatrick did in a very formal way. Some people like Brooks Koepka, I'm thinking, just kept getting bigger and stronger. And he kept, he took that swing he always had and made it faster, right? Because he was bigger and stronger. And it's not that basic. It's not. Brooks Koepka works hard in his game. I'm just saying, like, genetically speaking, you can picture him moving the club head faster, more easily. Yep. Dustin Johnson, like, why do I keep naming live players? Give me another. Tiger Woods, okay? Like, genetically, they're going to swing with a lot of speed.
Yeah.
I think someone like Jordan Spieth, Matt Fitzpatrick, those guys, not as much, and they've had to really kind of work at it. But there are answers to it, right? So depending on where your goals are as a player, maybe that speed development is something that you want to work on, right? Yes. Maybe that is and those are pretty tricky things to take on. But I would also not totally separate some of the things he described away from someone who's just trying to control their ball flight better as well. Mm-hmm. Because there are definite gains in low point control, impact location on the face, speed, path awareness, face awareness, in some of the timings of the thing that he's working on there.
100%.
Don't you see that with your students as well?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so going back to what Dr. MacKenzie talked about in terms of the options, the myth of the slow backswing, that is the biggest one that I see have ripple effects with low point, with face control, because when you're moving the club in the backswing, when not swinging the club, you're just moving the club to a position at the top. Now your runway to be applying force in the downswing direction gets shorter. Just what he was talking about with that car analogy, right? If you can get that car rolling towards you, all right, and be applying force to the car while it is moving toward you, then when that car starts moving the other direction, you already have a lot of this built up force into the car. Yeah.
But it also gives you like this ability to get to the left side sooner and then start to push back sooner to get that lead side cleared so that you can have the proper sequence and accelerate and release and have space and get the club to go in the place it needs to go. And if I get to the top of this backswing and everything stops and everything moves together, I'm going to have this I'm giving a general, very general picture of what I see. That forward leg stays very flexed, and then everything's coming into impact, and there's just everything feels held on to. Yeah. And it's just hard to get that sort of cracking of the whip feel, right? Lead side deceleration, and then, where everything comes through, because you're not there soon enough. You don't have enough time. You're not there soon enough. And he did a great job of describing muscles activating and,
turning the backswing muscles off is a skill.
That whole decel. So I had a student come in after we recorded, the next day. And we were working on it wasn't a super important lesson. He was just checking up and playing okay. And so I had him do the drill that Sasha was talking about, where you just start the club at the target,
swing it forward,
just point it forward and then swing back and hit it. He hit it so much better like that, way better.
Yes.
Every shot was solid and straight, and not that he was hitting it poor to start with. And I was like, I think you should just play like that. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, just do it. Why not?
Do it. Bust convention, right?
Defy convention. He's like, my friends will make fun of me. I said, so what? Take their money.
Yep. I love it.
But anyway, that was really fun. And then the whole discussion of, which I think has relevance for everybody. It's a little bit in the weeds. Obviously, as we got to the last couple bullet points, they got a little technical, right? The whole off plane swinging, and to me, the big takeaway there, and I mentioned the most important video. I don't even know who made that post that I mentioned a couple times. I linked it in there. It's just, again, it's this notion of what makes the club move. How is it actually? Why is it moving the way that it's moving? What do we need to create that? What should we do? What shouldn't we do? It was a very different way of looking at, my opinion, the swing, as opposed to the way that we had done it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And again, I was glad that for me, I tend to be in a growth mindset when it comes to golf, just in general. And so I could look at it and go, okay, I think at that point, Chris Como was decently famous, so to speak, with his instruction. I don't think I had ever heard of Sasho. And I just was watching it going, okay, that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. That's pretty cool. Okay, I got that. And like I said, I just started trying it. Right, that's what I did, and I instantly got longer, and that is no joke. Instantly got longer, and hit it better. Started playing better, and so that's a little we were kind of joking around. It's a little hard to describe on a podcast.
Yeah,
but essentially, it's I had a lesson today with a listener who's not a member, but he's a friend of a member, so he came. He sent me this nice email about our show, which was really cool, and he wanted to come for a lesson. And he had this club at the top of his backswing, pointed way across, what we call way across the line. Left wrist is like this, okay? But danged if he didn't. Once we got him in sequence, he got the thing right. He dropped the club center of mass behind the net force, right?
Yes.
And he just hit it beautifully. And I said, he's like, well, look at the loop in my swing. None of that matters.
No.
Forget about it. You're hitting it great. What is the relevancy of that? What is relevant to you right now? And this is why I was trying to communicate this. I didn't do a very good job. It was a long interview, and but the point I was trying to make was there's just cause and effect of stuff that it opened the door a lot, I felt to the cause and effect, to where we could just communicate things in a very different way to people and say, oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
Flying elbow, so what? Oh, you want to take it over here? Fine. We're just trying to create this relationship on the downswing between your hands, where they're moving, and where the club head is, essentially. I mean, we could look at club head. I know it's center of mass, but you can see the club head, right? Yeah. And you're just trying to create this relationship in a way that helps you
yes.
through the forces of nature, so to speak, get the club back on the ball more efficiently. That's it. And this guy today gained. He said he never saw me, and this guy practices on a TrackMan, by the way. Like he's a member of one of those places where he can, he never hit it over 250 before. He hit one 287.
Nice.
Club speed, he said, the fastest I ever swung at one was 105. He had a 108 today without trying. We were swinging at quote-unquote 80% tempo.
Yeah.
And the club was just motoring. Like, he's like, that TrackMan's not right. I'm like, it's totally right. It's right. And so I think what I was trying to say there is it gave us an understanding of things that we could interpret through TrackMan now that was just so much better than anything that we had before.
Yeah.
And I thank him for that because I don't think anybody else to that point had really spoken much about it, right? Like that wasn't a big conversation.
Yeah. And I think starting to interpret feels, right? Because what golfer hasn't had stretches of feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm working really hard to close the face. It just feels like it doesn't want to close. It's got this weird sort of like kickback feeling where the club face is trying to open through impact, and I'm trying my hardest to close it, but I just can't. And so understanding that passive torque has been able to quantify and really point golfers to, okay, no, what you're feeling is real. This is what's actually happening, right? You're creating the opposite relationship where the club head is on the above side of the net force, right? And that club is actually trying to open as it's being rotated. So the single arm swings I think are awesome. I do a very similar version where I'll have them take their normal grip and just remove fingers, specific fingers relative to the individual. So I'm creating a smaller attachment point on the grip so that if they create that poor relationship, they're not going to have the strength to fight through it. They're going to feel that club want to rotate in the wrong direction, and the feedback is going to be much more clear for them. So when you take fingers off, whether it be single arm or what have you, it really incentivizes you to create that relationship because the brain knows that if it doesn't, it's not going to have enough strength to close the face. It's not a look. It's not something that you can see on 2D camera, but it is an absolute necessity. I won't say necessity, but it is an enhancer to your ability to close the face.
I think it makes it easier.
It absolutely makes it easier.
It just makes it easier. It makes it easier, in my opinion, to hit the middle of the club face. Okay. Well, for many reasons. I won't adequately describe it well on a video on a podcast, but I think centeredness and contact just improves. I think your ability to control a path that's repeatable in a more shallow way, so a more in-out way, if that's what you're after. Not necessary, but it is easier to do that than if you're not doing that.
And it's also a heck of a lot easier to hit a fade that isn't a spinny, high, like slice. Right? It's a much easier way to hit kind of a lower spin fade. Doing it
no
that
question. The gentleman I was discussing today, that's what he was hitting. It was like a little. He came in because he pull hooked everything for like years. Yep. I just have this pull hook thing. Okay. He left hitting a fade 30 yards longer, right? Yeah. So it's like, and way more consistent. So it's not about necessarily I don't want to say it's about hitting a draw all the time. It's not, but it's easier to make that sort of path that's
probably more adaptable.
Down kind of, yeah. So I thought that was great. I mean, I think that's, in my opinion, that's the big influence that Sasho's had. In my opinion, the biggest, that discussion. The other stuff's huge too. I'm not saying it's not, but
it's probably one of the only things we can really point to. There are several things full swing that we can point to that actually give you a larger margin of error. When golfers are saying, hey, what can I do technique-wise to give myself a larger margin of error? That's one of them, right? If you're creating that relationship, and then like what I've talked about earlier, the general rhythm being fairly resonant, like those two things are going to stack the deck in your favor more than probably most other things.
No doubt about it. So I think that was pretty good. I mean, the last little bit was very conceptual and very coach driven. So I don't know much. I think that's a discussion in the teaching world.
I think giving the
people
listener
talk about a lot, think about a lot.
Yeah. So when we're talking about basically the impact variables of low point in 3 dimensions, club face to path, and speed, really the question being, if I reduce how much those variables are changing through kind of where impact could occur, am I going to improve my predictability? And it's reasonable. It's certainly reasonable, but we just don't know yet. And it certainly hasn't been strong enough in the research to suggest that definitively, yes, there is something that will allow you to be more predictable. So when we talk about what that means for coaches and golfers, it still means that the best way to be predictable with those skill variables is to train them. You just need to have awareness. You need to practice them, right? You need to understand how to move them when needed, and not try to change them by changing things that aren't directly relevant. Like to try to change the club face, right? We're not going to try and change, what our pelvis is doing halfway down, or like what our rib cage is,
Correct.
You have to train those skills because they're so micro. Like the difference between, we're talking about different grooves on the club, like the difference between being one groove high and one groove low, the difference between being 2 degrees left or 2 degrees right on the face, which again, every second on the clock is 6 degrees. Even a lot of times in putting, like when you talk about matching line and speed, like the actual miles per hour variance that you need oftentimes can be so incredibly small, you can't possibly attribute it to anything general movement based, is what we're saying currently. Now, the research might come out in another couple of years to say, hey, actually, if you have a lower rate of change in the club face, you do get more predictable, and that'd be great. And I'll be teaching low rates of closure or whatnot. But like for now, it's still a matter of practice, awareness, adaptability, predictability kind of stuff.
Nice summary. So that kind of wraps up our discussion on Dr. Sasho MacKenzie's interview, which again was, to me, very exciting. Really thoughtful of him. Really well articulated. We didn't have to say much because he just was very colorful and descriptive, and we knew that was going to be the case because that's just how he is. So, again, that's why we kind of thought he'd be like such a great interview, and it turned out, in my opinion, to be all of that. And it's interesting, Dr. MacKenzie brought up some points about things like, being growth minded, like all these things. Like he made the point a couple of times. Like he said, that's my whole philosophy is just try, don't believe in any. I don't know exactly how he said it, but basically, like, whatever you think might work, test it out. Try it, test it out. See if it works. Do some research.
Yeah.
Try and see if it works for you.
It's abundantly obvious that he is not coupling his ego and his self-worth with his craft. He said it. He's like, look, you can poke holes in the stack, and I'll be the first one to say, hey, look, I got this wrong. Let's improve. Like that is growth mindset in a nutshell.
Yeah. So that takes me back to my 2 days at UVA. But I wanted to kind of, because I said to Robbie, I'm like, it'd be kind of cool to just wrap this episode with some themes that we're seeing, right, through the lens of stuff we've talked about, I've learned, you've learned, we've shared, that I think have helped people with their golf game, their growth as a golfer. And it keeps popping up in the world, and I keep seeing it. And so I was telling you that the first day there was a speaker there, amazing professor at UVA. And he spoke about literally the same research from the same author who was, can you pronounce her name for me?
Dr. Carol Dweck.
Carol Dweck, right? She's the one that authored the research on growth versus fixed mindset that people will reference. And he did an incredible talk about it. And he talked about her, and he talked about the characteristics of both. And I'm like, he goes, does anybody here know what a growth or a fixed mindset is? And I was like, I mean, I might have just recorded a podcast on it last week, but I didn't want to go up in front of the class and say that. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And so he detailed that through the eyes of being a parent with an incoming child to the University of Virginia. So I thought that was really cool how he framed that. And then the next day I took the picture, which we referenced at the top of the show, which was this very world famous author and psychologist at UVA, who said, education is an intervention, was her first slide. And I took the picture, sent it to you as soon as she put it up there. And I was kind of half paying attention because I'm texting you. But basically what she said in the very next sentence was, as a psychologist, as a teacher, as a professor, as a parent, she was referencing this experience as a lot of people, when things are going wrong, think they need this complete overhaul, right? And she said a lot of times all they need is a little better understanding and a little better education.
Yeah.
And they don't have to change everything that's going on. And I was like, this is the point of the golf intervention, right? This is what we've been making this point from day one. So it's cool to see these things play out. And we're seeing them kind of pop up in the world. I was riding the Peloton. I like to ride the Peloton when I'm doing like steady state cardio and watch Netflix, right? So I could just put the heart rate monitor on and I'm trying to keep it in zone 2 and I'm just pedaling, right? So I can watch an hour-long show on Netflix. I was watching is it the Full Swing, the PGA Tour, whatever documentary, and the Tom Kim episode. He's taking a lesson from Chris Como, right? Have you seen this? You'll never guess what they talked about. Are you focusing on outcomes or are you focusing on the process? I mean, they had this long conversation. I watched this 2 days ago. I'm like, this is amazing, right? He's like, Chris Como's like, I think you're too outcome focused. You really should just be focused on the process of hitting good shots. And and Tom Kim's 20 and he's like kind of like pitching a fit a little bit like in his lesson or whatever. And I just thought, man, I didn't finish the episode, but I thought that was pretty cool that we're seeing stuff. So from a student standpoint, the feedback I'm getting, and I'd like to hear your thoughts too, is I think people are practicing better. I think that's been a huge thing that we want to get out into the world. I think they're thinking about their scoring better. Yeah. Like just from a data standpoint. What is it? What are the relevant skills? What do I need to practice? I had a level 1 golfer who's like your dream student, almost tries too hard, like at times. Like I got to rein him back a little bit from an effort standpoint. And he goes, what I love so much about your show is that I know as a level 1 golfer, I know what my short game is supposed to look like. He was referencing short game. He goes, I know what, and I do. Like he's like, I putt a lot from off the green. I play it a lot. But he goes, when you did the episode about what's the next level, the 3 next level, I realized I've got to learn to hit the ball in the air more. And so I've been working on that. And I'm pulling that out on the course when I have a good situation. Yeah. And I'm trying to execute it. I'm like, this is incredible. Yeah. Like, this is all we've ever wanted, right? Yep. So to hear it come back from the student in a way that has felt like impactful.
Yeah.
Is satisfying because at the end of the day, you and I do this for pure satisfaction of that. That's all. That's the only reason we're doing. Like there is no other reason. From day one, it's like we knew we wanted to put something good out into the world, and that's all we're trying to do. And I think it is having an effect. Yes. So thank you, listeners, for sticking with us because I hope you are learning something. How about you, Rob? Are you seeing anything out there? Like, what are your big takeaways from coaching and teaching, and maybe even playing and interactions that you're seeing with people? From this first sort of 20 plus episodes that we've done.
Yeah, some of the best feedback I've gotten is golfers saying, like now when I see information that crosses my attention, I'm always asking myself questions now. Mm-hmm. I'm like, is this actually for me? Is this what I need? Is this really for more of like an elite player or a level 2 player or they're starting to, very similar to what you said, they're starting to think about contextualizing all of the options that they have available, and they're just spending their time in more relevant places. They're seeing things going in the right direction. not because I'm a soothsayer. I'm like giving them some magic voodoo. I'm just like placing their attention on what is the most relevant from a performance standpoint, which what you outlined there beautifully with some of the metrics, and then also from like a process standpoint. How are we spending our time in training? Where is our attention going when we're actually playing the game? And thinking about our attention as a currency and how it is finite, and then we can be intentional with where we place it. So, yeah, those would be kind of the big ones for me. But yeah, just really grateful to be doing this with you. I'm having a lot of fun, and hope you, the listener, are as well. And we're looking forward to keeping it going.
Hey, I think I heard a couple stats about podcasts. At any time, there's 2 million podcasts, I think, on basically in the United States, which is a phenomenally large amount. And the other one I think you told me was that I think 95% fail before 10 episodes.
Yeah. We're in good
and
company.
I think it's pretty cool that we're at, I think this is 22 or 3, this one that we're recording. And I think we're just getting a groove a little bit. So I'm excited for that. I think we just discussed a few like series thoughts that we're going to go through. We want to do way more listener question episodes, so you got to send those in to us. Either email us at thegolfintervention@gmail.com, or you can contact us on our Substack. So if you haven't subscribed, there is a free subscription, which has a few things, and you can communicate with us on there. And there's also our exclusive content that is behind the paywall, and that is thegolfintervention.substack.com. I think Substack is an emerging social media network that I think over the next, I'm going to guess 3 to 5 years, gains a lot of steam because it's a dynamic place that you can find people who want to put content out there for a community. Like that's why we like it, because it's a controlled community of people that are interested in what you have to say. It's not, it's not clickbait. It's not that. Yeah. And as you know, as a listener, if you've been with us since episode 1, we don't do anything for clickbait. It's not about that for us. We're just putting good stuff out into the universe. It's all our intention ever is. And so we do put some stuff. We've recorded 2 bonus episodes. I think the second one will be uploaded pretty soon on there. It's already been recorded. Robbie has written some great stuff, articles and some of the research that he reads, and he summarizes it. It's like the Cliff Notes to golf success. He's like your nerd filter. So if you need a nerd filter, it's Robbie. Yeah. It would be your guide. And so we're going to keep putting stuff on there, and it always stays on there. So every month more stuff loads up, and you'll have more access to that. So if you want to follow us on there, that'd be cool. And we do have a YouTube channel now, right? So we're recording now in video. We've done a few episodes. We've put them up there. Our other episodes go up as audio only. It's like a YouTube video, but it's just a podcast. So you just see our logo and you can hear it. So if you want to listen to us on YouTube, if you want to like and subscribe to that channel just for fun, I'm sure that would help us out. Of course, always like and subscribe and write a review on Apple Podcasts if you could, or Spotify. Those are our 2 big ones. We've had some really cool reviews on there. Yeah. Have you read some of those reviews, Robbie? Have you seen them?
I've seen the ones that you've sent me, but no, I need to go back and look at them. I appreciate everyone that's done that for sure.
I think it's so cool. I'm going to read a couple real quick, since this is like a episode where we're reminiscing. But this one came in the other day. It said, "Have found the podcast approachable and informative, and love how they break it down into different level of golfers. Helps new golfers know what they should be focusing on, but also what they should be striving for." And isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I can't wait for the next episode. I thought that one was really cool. And the one that came in before that, the people took time to write these, which is so cool. So thank you to the folks that did this. Great podcast with engaging hosts. Refreshing alternative to the, quote, "this one trick will make you perfect at golf," end quote, content that's out there. Good distillation of the research and statistics to help show what the focus areas should be to improve your game across different levels of players.
That's pretty much us. Yeah, couldn't have said it better than myself. Yeah.
that was sort of our mission statement, essentially, that makes me feel really good that we're accomplishing the things that we want to do, and that there are people that are getting stuff out of it. So that's what I think I would say the listener probably realized in the last probably 2 months we've been, there's a lot of energy behind what we're doing. Our ideas are clicking good. We're planning better. I think our skills are getting better, and I'm having more fun. I just am. Okay, it's kind of selfish. I don't have any actual like hobbies. So this is it. This is the closest.
This is my hobby.
This is my golf pros don't have hobbies. Like we don't. Like our life is overwhelmed by one big hobby, so the rest of it just kind of like.
Yeah.
Especially when you have 4 kids, like you're just not going fishing much or whatever.
No.
So this is it, and it's been fun for us. And I would say thank you to Rob Fales for being along the journey. Could not have done it without you. I look forward to the next 20 plus episodes.
Me too.
I was gonna tease maybe what we're talking about. I'm not gonna tease. Just know it's gonna be good. Whatever we come up with, it's gonna be fun. You're gonna learn something. I do think our next episode will be the final part of our mental games series.
Yes. Yep.
Where we're going to cover sort of like as you're actually playing the game. We took it from big picture mindset.
Yep.
If you haven't checked out the mindset episode, just do it. It's like we said, it's research that's game changing, and it applies to your whole life, obviously, not just golf. But we did a golf application, but man, that stuff is just transformational. And now we're going to bring it down from the macro more to the micro, right? Like we're going to bring it into, here I am as a golfer trying to play around in golf. What do I need out of my quote unquote, for lack of a better term, mental game?
Yes.
to get me playing my best golf.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about that on the next episode, I think.
That's the plan.
That'll be fun. All right, Rob Fales, any words of wisdom you want to put out into the stratosphere tonight?
No, I think you got it. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you. That was fun. Thank you for indulging us in our guilty pleasure, and we look forward to catching you on the next episode. Have a great week, everybody.